now call on our Honorable Attorney General, Honorable Anil Nandlall.
Madam Speaker, it is my privilege to make my contribution to this year's budget debates. And I want to begin by welcoming all these students who are here, because I will make many references to you in the course of my presentation. You heard the presentation of the honorable member who spoke before me. And you would have heard the honorable member, use the term mendacious throughout her speech. Mendacious means lying. It's an unparliamentary word. So because you can't say lying, they say mendacious. And let me just, for one moment, just one point I want to make. The honorable member stood there and told us that we must do better when we are in government. And she stood there and she said that the honorable Prime Minister and our government continued where she left off in the telecommunications sector. So they went to the elections in 2015 with a manifesto which included a 100-day plan. 100 days, they told the people, they told your parents, vote for us, and within 100 days, 100 days, just a few months, we are going to do these things. Let us deal with one issue to demonstrate the mendacity. And the issue is at number 19, the promise, within 100 days, liberalization of the telecommunications sector. 5 years after, there was no liberalization done. The Honorable Prime Minister and our government in 2021 liberalized the sector. That is why you have so many internet providers, you have so many cell phone providers, and you are young people. You are using these facilities, and you know that you are only able to do it a few years ago when we came into government. That is the mendacity and the mendaciousness that we are speaking about. And I can stand here and go on for a long time, but I don't have the time. But Mr. Speaker, I want to come to the budget itself. And I want to begin by recognizing and acknowledging the work of the Ministry of Finance, headed by the distinguished Dr. Ashley Singh, and all the public officers across the state sectors who would have worked assiduously in compiling yet another comprehensive, transformational, and sustainable national budget. And I'll come back to the term sustainable later. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, we have heard day in, day out that the budget has nothing for the people of Guyana. But the simple truth is that this budget will inject into the economy of Guyana, a small economy of less than 1 million people, $1.6 trillion. That's what the budget alone will inject into the economy. When you add that to foreign direct investments, local private sector investments, the impact is going to be staggering on every single Guyanese, except the losers on the other side. The losers on the other side. You heard the honorable member, we are building highways, we are building roadways, we are building a Demerara Harbor Bridge that will be about 100 feet in the air. She brings one street. One street. and she shows the children the mendaciousness. She produces one street. We are building thousands of roads. You come from various villages across this country. You come from various villages across this country. And I say to you that wherever you are living, my children, wherever you are living, the streets in your communities are being built. Wherever you are living. But you heard her for yourself. One street. That my people, that my children, is the mendacity that we are speaking about. Mr. Speaker, speaking at the lower end of the batting order gives me certain benefits. So I will not, a lot of information has been put out there already on the budget. The parliamentary record is inundated with data of policies and projects in the budget. And I don't wish to retravel those grounds. But Mr. Speaker, later this year, all of us in this House will be coming into your villages, and you are too young, but we will be asking your parents to vote for us. Later this year, all of us will be asking you to do that. And I want to speak to the electorate from the platform of Budget 2025. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, there is a direct correlation between these budgetary estimates and national elections. These budgetary estimates are not sterile, they bear a relationship. Because when we come back, when we go to you, your parents, when we go to the people of this country later this year, we have to demonstrate to them that the promises that we have made to them in 2020 have been delivered. We have to show them that it has been delivered. And once we show them that they have been delivered, we will ask them to return us to office. And that is what they certainly will do. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, electoral politics is based upon two important pillars: trust and track record. Trust and track record. You see, when you go to the electorate, you're asking the electorate to vote for you. And once they vote for you, you will deliver these promises. So they're trusting you because you're not in government yet for that term, but you're telling them, give me your vote and this is what I'll give you back. You're asking them to trust you. And one of the main ways by which they can determine whether or not to trust you is by examining your track record. The human being is not a robot. The human being is informed and is guided by his experience. And therefore, track record is important in that trust relationship. So, Mr. Speaker, we have two parties, main parties in the country that have spent, one, the PNC, whether they are AFC, whether they are APNU, they are one and the same thing. They are all PNC. You heard the Honorable Member, Cathy Hughes, an AFC member, because she couldn't point to developments and accomplishments during the last term in government. She had to go back till to Burnham. Gone back to Burnham, and you will read and your parents will tell you what Burnham did to this country. But I don't want to detain you on that issue. But they are the same thing. And then, so they governed for 30 years or a little over 30 years since independence, and the PPP governed for just under 30 years. So, Mr. Speaker, I now want, so you have a lot to examine on the track record. You have 3 decades of track record from both political parties. And Mr. Speaker, we heard a lot about good governance. We heard a lot about transparent governance. We heard a lot about constitutionality and the rule of law. But none of these attributes, as important as they are, none of these attributes can exist without a simple thing: free and fair elections. They can't exist without a democracy. Democracy is the sine qua non of all those important attributes. And Mr. Speaker, the right to vote is perhaps the most important right to the citizens of any country. Because if you take away that right to vote, you deny that citizen of every other right. Because a governor who is elected, who takes power without the vote of the electorate, will remain in power because he doesn't need the vote of the electorate, and therefore will do as he or she pleases. So all the other rights will never be realized. Your right to speak, your right to move, right to access justice, all of that will be interfered with. Right to education, if you don't have free and fair elections. So let us examine the track record of the 2 parties on the question of free and fair elections. This is where I wanted to go. I had to travel a little circuitous route before I reached there. So we went, as you know, you are bright children. In 1966, we got independence. And we went to our first election in 1968. The PNC was in government. And they passed a law. They passed a law that allowed for overseas voting. And 1/5 of the persons who voted at those elections were overseas. They voted overseas. And a British television firm did a documentary. And they decided to follow the trail of the voters. And they went to London, and they went to all the places that these people were allegedly voted. And they videoed cemeteries, dead people, nobody lived there. They went to the houses, the addresses. They went to the addresses, and they asked the people who were living there if they know Tom Samuels. The people said, Tom Samuels never lived here. We have been living here for 50 years. You know what they did? They sat down in Georgetown, compiled a list, and voted for 36,000 people in the United Kingdom. 36,000 people that don't exist. And you know what the results at that time? At that time, today, we have 65 members of this House elected. In those days, in 1968, it was only 42 members of the House. Only 42. And listen to the results. The results were the PNC, out of a total of 42 votes, 42 seats, they got 30 seats. PNC got 30 seats, more than a 2/3 majority. They took 30 seats. The People's Progressive Party got 19 seats. And the UF got the remainder. 30 seats they took at those elections. And at that time, the PPP base was in the majority of the voters in this country. So you understand the magnitude of the fraud? You understand the magnitude of the fraud? And we were a young nation. That is the first scar they inflicted on the democratic tapestry of this country. We were only 3 years old, 2 years old as a country. 2 years old, and they destroyed the democratic credentials of this country, and they laid the foundation of what was to come. 1973 elections followed. It was worse rigged than that one. Worse, they used the army this time. Because of the exposure to the overseas voting, they had to find another mechanism to rig. This time, they used the army, and the army officers went to all the polling stations and picked up the ballot boxes and took them to 3 central locations, one in Berbice, one in Demerara, one in Essequibo. You were not counting at the place of polls, you were counting at the central place. So when the army picked it up, what they did, they threw away all the ballots in the box, and the army officers marked the X next to the palm tree, the PNC symbols, whole night. Whole night.
What you call them, mendacious?
Mendacious. That is fraud and trickery and artifice of its highest level.
Rascality.
And Mr. Speaker, at that time, we had 53 seats in the House. 53 seats. They took 37 of the 53 seats. 37 seats they took. Another 2/3 majority. You know what they gave to the PPP? They gave to the PPP 14 seats. The mighty PPP got 14 seats in 1973, when the PPP base was 50% of the population. Led by Dr. Chenny Jagan. Let us go to the 1980 elections. 1980 elections. Again, 53 seats. Oh yes. And Dr. Anthony is reminding me, at a village on the Quarantine Coast, when the army went to pick up the boxes, two young comrades, among others, blocked the soldiers from taking away the ballot boxes. They say, you're going to steal our ballots. And you know what the soldiers did? They shot those 2 men. One was 18 years and one was 24 years old.
Shot them dead.
And did not take them to the hospital, but threw them on the back of a pickup truck and went all the other polling stations to pick up more ballot boxes while those men bled like animals in the back of a pickup until they died.
Had to use parties.
That is what. So I am so happy that you are here to understand your history. So let's go to the 1980 elections. The 1980 elections, there were 53 seats in the parliament at that time. 53 seats in 1980 elections. The PNC took 41 of the 53 seats. 41 of the 53 seats. They gave the PPP 10 seats. The mighty party of Chenny Jagan got 10 seats. And the Speaker's party got 2. He lucky get 2. TUF get 2. And then we come to the 1985 elections. You know, they say they had 2 presidents. One President Burnham and one President Hoyt. President Burnham presided over those elections. Let us hear what Mr. Hoyt did. You know, he's regarded as a Democrat. He's regarded as a Democrat. So let us see what Hoyt did in 1995. In 1985, out of 53 seats in the parliament, they got 42. They got more than in 1980. 42 seats. You know the PPP got? You know we got? 8. 8 seats. 8 seats. And the WPA got 1 seat. That was the massive nature of the rigging and the fraud. And today, they want to lecture us. We must do better when we are in government. That is what they did when they were in government.
Tell us what happened in
That is what they did. I'm coming to 2020. And then we had free and fair elections in 1992. And it was not an easy task. We had to drag, the international community had to get involved. The Carter Center had to get involved. And Mr. Hugh Desmond Hoy, the president, had to be dragged by the scruff of his neck like a bull to the slaughterhouse before he agreed to the reforms. And then is when we get observers for the first time. None of these elections had observers. They ban observers. Then is when we get counting at the place of polls for the first time. So it became hard for the thief, for the Mendes. Hard for the rig. So, and then we went to the 92 elections. We went to the 92 elections. We got 31 seats. They got 30. You saw the results changed completely? Right? And the WPA got one, and the TUF got one, I think. That is what free and fair elections did. You see how we moved from 8? We moved from 8, a measly 8, to in the 30s in one elections. One elections. That is what democracy had brought to this country. And then we had the 1997 elections. We brought back foreign observers. All over the world, people came here and observed. We had 2001 elections, 2006 elections, 2011 elections. Those are the elections we presided over. And all were certified to be free and fair by the international community and the world. And you know what's the margin? Was just a few seats margin of difference between the PPP. They win by 20 and 30 seats. We won by 2 or 3 seats because that is what reflected the reality of the vote on the ground. And that is what we did. And then all of you would know about the 2020 elections. All of you would have read about the 2020 elections and the multiple attempts to rig those elections. I am so happy that 2020 came to refresh your memories. And what was different about the 2020 elections is that it was recorded on the social media. So everything that they did was streamed live across the globe. You could have been in your home and you could have seen them in their multiple attempts to rig. And you know what's the beauty of the social media? Every year it brings back the images as a memory. So every time you plan to forget how they tried to rig the elections, badam on the Facebook, it comes back as a memory. It comes back as a memory, and you see the madness all over again. But forget about the 100 governments that condemned her for their conduct. Forget about CARICOM, the OAS, the Commonwealth, the private sector, and all the international organizations that condemned them. Forget the American government threatened to sanction them. Forget all of that. Forget what the PPP say. Let me share with you what a man by the name of Gaskin, what was his first name? Dominic Gaskin. Now, who is Dominic Gaskin? Dominic Gaskin was a minister under their government and a leader of the Alliance for Change. He was Minister of Business. And he was also, or he is also, the son-in-law of the then president. So he's not an ordinary man. He got familial connections to the highest office, and he was part and parcel of the collective called the government of the day. And this is what he said in a public statement, and I will share it with you. Convenient clips. Having said what I had to say back in March, and having then stayed silent for 3 months while a recount was agreed, challenged and finally executed, I can no longer wait quietly and politely while our country gets hijacked, ridiculed, and torn apart. You know who was doing the hijacking? the ridiculing and the tearing apart his colleagues on that side. In a nutshell, there are 6 things that I would like to elaborate on concerning the 2020 elections adventure. 1, a win by either major contestants ought not to come as a shock to anyone. Fair comment. 2, supporters of APNU AFC were misled into believing that the coalition had won the elections. Misled! Just like how she attempted to mislead you for 35 minutes. They were misleading the whole country. 3, there was then a deliberate attempt to discredit the entire elections. When they couldn't rig it, they then decided to discredit it. 4, no evidence has been provided to support the claim of vast numbers of rejected ballots among the disciplined forces, let alone the allegation of a deliberate attempt to invalidate the votes of the disciplined services. 5, no power on earth, let me repeat, for the opposition leaders' benefit. No power on earth can convince the APNU AFC leadership that it lost the elections. No power on earth can convince them that they lost the 2020 election. Up to now, they're not admitting that they lost. 6, all that occurred since March 4th will make it extremely difficult for the APNU and AFC to ever defeat the PPP in 2020. It's not I saying so, it's their own saying that about them publicly.
That's correct. That's correct.
Let me skip. Having paid close attention to the tabulated results of the 2020 election and having done some projections of my own, I knew by Wednesday, March the 4th, that a coalition victory, while possible, was unlikely. March the 4th, the Alimana already know they lose. They knew even before.
They know they lose now.
I was aware that we had lost the east coast of the Amarara sub-district by several thousand and the East Bank sub-district by close to 1,000. At the time, the returning officer for District 4, Clement Mingo, had completed the tabulation for Georgetown area, showing the coalition ahead by nearly 40,000 votes. This was clearly not enough to close the more than 50,000 lead that the PPPC had gained in the 9 other electoral districts.
Meanwhile, that mendacious woman who just spoke was claiming victory.
Then the recount came. The nation puts its faith in the CARICOM observer team. In the end, the CARICOM team delivered its report endorsing the elections and the results of the recount, only to have it rejected by the coalition in favor of a devious piece of reasoning by the Chief Elections Officer, Keith Lowenfield. The claims of fraud were grossly exaggerated and unfortunately designed to fool party supporters who had placed their faith in the coalition into believing that there was actual evidence of serious election rigging by the PPPC.
Being perpetrated by the mendacious woman who just spoke. One of them.
All of this leads me to the very uncomfortable conclusion that the APNU AFC has no intention of relinquishing control of government. 5 years after winning an election and gaining office with a fair amount of goodwill, the coalition is saying to the people who put us there the equivalent of, quote, unless and until we are satisfied beyond a shadow of doubt that more votes are cast in favor of another party in an election than we deem credible, we ain't going nowhere. So no matter what the arbiter thinks, no matter what the judge thinks, no matter what GCOM does, no matter how the people voted, if they are not satisfied, they ain't going nowhere. And let me conclude. My message to my colleagues in APNU AFC is simple. Oh, the man begging them. The man begging them. This was since 2020. They had 5 years to heed the man's advice. Hear what the man saying. My message to my colleagues in APNU is simple. No one elected us to remain in office forever. There is no reasonable basis on which you can claim to have won more votes than the PPPC in these elections. Level with your supporters and start directing your energies towards becoming a credible opposition party in time for 2025. Above all, try to regain the trust. Remember, I began this speech by the word trust? I began this speech by the word trust. Above all, try to regain the trust of the swing voter. You will never win another election without them.
Heed those words.
They have not learned anything. Nothing on that side.
Instead, the mendacious woman
Honorable member,
continues with
I require an extension for you to complete your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his speech.
Thank you. Please continue, Honorable Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I go quickly. You have heard them make promises after promises. Promises after promises. They document it in a manifesto. Remember I told you about trust? And my colleagues on this side have already set out a slew, hundreds if not thousands of promises that they made that they never fulfilled. But let me deal with a couple. Let me deal with a couple related to my sector. This is what they said. Constitutional reform. Constitutional reform. They promised the people that within 100 days they will complete constitutional reform. The APNU AFC will immediately, you are bright people, immediately appoint a constitutional reform commission consisting of representatives of all stakeholders, trade unions, the private sector, religious and faith-based organizations, women, youth, professional organization, and the university. Its mandate will be to undertake the urgent task of fashioning a comprehensive reforms for the Constitution. Hear the lineup? Women organization, faith-based organization, and guess what they did? They appointed what they call a steering committee headed by one Nigel Hughes, the husband of the member who spoke and the leader now of the AFC. So you see the connection. They appoint Nigel Hughes to head a group of about 4 persons. Geeta Chandan, the honorable member, another PNC, APNU person was on the thing. Remember they promised independence, broad-based. They had Haslin Paris, another member of the PNC on the committee, and they had 2 other token appointments. And they paid $20 million to this group.
who they paid that?
They paid that to the gentleman in this picture.
Where's the time?
Look at the Kodak moment.
Where's the time?
There's a handing over. There's a handing over of a phantom report that none of us, nobody in this country has ever seen. And 5 years after, not a single step towards constitutional reform. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I come to this one, and this one tickled me. This one tickled me a little. Dr. Singh, hear this one. Powers of President and Prime Minister. That is the caption. Powers of President and Prime Minister. And hear what it says. Rebalancing, rebalancing the powers and responsibilities of the Prime Minister and the President in a manner meant to reduce abuse, avoid conflict of interest, and facilitate the more efficient execution of state function. When I read this, I want to cry for Moses Nagamotu. Oh my God, look how we all promised him. Not only did you fool the people, this is how you fool your own Prime Minister. You tell him that he gonna get great powers, and all he end up with is responsibility for Chronicle newspapers. The most diminished Prime Minister on planet Earth. That is what. That's what you promised. Let's go on. This is another one. This is an interesting one too. Dr. Singh. They promise that they will agree on a protocol to break the deadlock over the appointment of a consensually agreed Chancellor and Chief Justice and bring an end to this impasse. They will devise a protocol to break a protocol. You can't stop them with language. A protocol. Not an amendment to the Constitution. No. It's a protocol. And you hear the opposition leader. The People's National Congress reform. A protocol. Where is the protocol? Where is the protocol? And this one is particularly relevant to the Parliament. This is what they said in relation to Parliament and the National Assembly. This is what they said. Mr. Clark, I will ask you, to the Speaker, I will ask you to comment on these at a later stage. They will appoint, now all of us know that we have a Parliamentary Management Committee comprising of 5 on that side and 5 on this side. But that, according to them, is not working. This is what they promise. Appointing a parliamentary committee dedicated to making recommendations for the continuing reform and improvement in the working of the parliamentary system. Where is that committee, Mr. Clark? Where is that committee? Let me go on quickly. They will appoint, and again the language.
Member, I'll give you 30 seconds to conclude, please.
Yes, they will appoint an in situ parliamentary council, and they will establish a National Assembly Budget Office. An in situ parliamentary council means an in-house parliamentary council, and a National Assembly Budget Office. Mr. Clark, where is your National Assembly Budget Office? Where is your in situ parliamentary council? Madam Speaker, I went through that, and I have much more materials to show to the people of this country that they can never be trusted. They are going to come to the electorate later this year, and they will promise the skies, and they will promise the mountains, and they will promise the oceans. But Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, it is all a farce. It is nothing but a 3-card trick. I thank you very much.